Just for the gentleman in the back, we're going to wait a couple minutes if that's okay, sir, for one of our board members to try to sign on. Thank you. I'm going to call to order the Crime Control and Prevention District Board meeting. It is August 25th, and the time is 6:03 p.m. And hopefully Mr. Ingram will be able to sign on here shortly. We do have a quorum present is Mr. Booth, Mr. Evans, Mr. Marr, Mr. Hurst, and myself. So we do have a quorum. The second item is citizen comments. Do we have anyone that would like to address the board? Okay. I'll close public comment. The consent agenda for the meetings back in July 28th, and what I have is on 4.3, the corrections. It said Chairman Jones made a motion to authorize the following as signatories for the Crime Control and Prevention District checking account. It reads on here, Chief Zuniga, Captain Davis, and it should read Chief Zuniga, Captain Wagoner, and Nora Davis. So if you give me just a second, I'm going to make those corrections. Forgive me. Does anyone else have any corrections or any comments on the previous meetings minutes? Do I hear a motion to accept the meeting minutes from July 28th as corrected?
So moved.
Mr. Booth makes the motion. Do I hear a second? Mr. Hurst seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Give me just 1 second, Chief, and let me make those corrections by hand. And Ms. Davis, thank you very much for allowing us to have you as a signatory. I appreciate that very much. Next is new business. We have a public hearing on the proposed crime control and prevention budget of the Castle Hills Crime Control and Prevention District for the fiscal year beginning January 1st of 2022 and ending December 31st of 2022. I am here, it's 6:06 PM and I am opening. We are now open for any kind of public comment, public input. Seeing none, I will close 4.1 for the public hearing. 4.2 is discussion and possible action on the adoption of the proposed crime control and prevention budget of the Castle Hills Crime Control and Prevention District for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2022 and ending December 31st, 2022, and submitting resolution 2021-08-25 with the recommendation to City Council for approval. Chief, if I may open that up to you and
Yes, sir. Board members, thanks for being here again tonight. I know that the last month that we met, I had provided y'all with a spreadsheet that was probably a little bit more planned. I had some color to it to be able to break down what the proposals were. Mr. Booth had suggested that we go to a 40% or 20% increase for future purchases. And as I explained in the breakdowns on those items, the different colors, you can see the different columns where at the very end, the differences on the totals of what those increases would come out to for the 10, 15, and the 20%. So it is my recommendation in reference regarding the increases for future purchases that we go to the 10%. To stay more in line with the revenue as well that would be coming in. If we go to the 20%, we'd be far exceeding those amounts. Also, the other item that I had increased was the purchase of video equipment. That was to take into account for the body cams, which incidentally, we called on Monday and they said that they were shipped on Monday, so any day. The other one, and that's 12,000, that would cover the cost, the annual lease purchase of that item. And then the other one was the IT support, increase in that line item from 35 to, or from 30 to 35,000, an additional 5,000. And the other one that was pending was the crisis fund, the one y'all elected to change the name from miscellaneous on the very top or close to the top. And the only thing that's pending there is the amount. Y'all didn't discuss what kind of amount y'all wanted to try to allocate for that fund.
talking about the crisis fund?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions or comments for the chief? Chief, could you explain why we are adding $5,000 to the IT support going from 30? And I know we discussed this, but just for the board members, could you explain why we need?
Yes, sir. So some of you are aware that we have been using one IT support company, and we've recently been looking at changing to another one that will provide better services for the city and as a whole. Of course, as we make that change, the premiums will, obviously go up, they'll increase as well. So it's not too much, but yeah, it's 5,000, but it's just forecasting that there, we could potentially go into that line item.
Any comments or questions, the board members? Just one more, Chief. Can you explain where we get the 63,000 from the transfer and fund balances? That's just an estimate of what we might what we might have left over from this year's budget. Is that correct?
I believe that's what that is transferring over from the 2021 projected into the 2022. Yeah, she,
I mean, it was, I think 63 from put in for this year and um,
Ms. Davis is saying that.
that's correct. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay. I will, I guess for the crisis fund, I guess $500 is okay, but it's going to take us a few years to get to the point where if we need to make a major expenditure, that we might have to rely on the crisis fund. So I'll leave it open for suggestions or other comments, whether we should increase that at least to 1,000, so we can kind of get a better jump on that, just in case we need to. And that's for the crisis fund, the very top line.
So if I may real quick, on the big sheet that I provided y'all, there's, if you look over to the right, we're showing the projected sales tax revenue for the adopted year. That's what they're projecting, that we will be going, the increase from 2021 to 2022. Or however, that kind of like goes back with all the increases that we're suggesting. It kind of like draws that away or takes away from that amount. So, but we're still, what is it, September, 4 months away from,
Okay.
From the end of the year. So that there's a little bit of fluctuation.
And, you know, if necessary, the future board can make any kind of adjustments as they see fit, you know, during the next term. So, okay, that sounds good. Anyone else have any questions, concerns, comments regarding the budget for fiscal year 2022?
500 for the crisis fund doesn't seem like a lot to me. I think we should at least do the 1,000, if not more.
I don't know how to work that.
No,
Just the mic.
that's fine. But welcome, Mr. Ingram. It is 6:13 and Mr. Ingram is now present. And Mr. Ingram, we're in the middle of discussing the budget. We've approved the minutes already, and so welcome. It's good to see you, sir.
Well, I'm glad to be here, and sorry I couldn't be there in person, but I had another Zoom meeting right before this one, so I figured I'd just stay on Zoom.
We're just glad you're here, sir.
I agree about the crisis fund, that maybe perhaps it may not be sufficient. But I did have a question on the spreadsheet, the column that says, is it say 5-year average, or it says AVE? What is that column for?
On which the one with the color,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So
it's
yes, sir, that's a 5-year average over the since 2015. The years 15, 16, 17 through 19 is a 5-year average.
So you're saying on average, the crisis fund has been $4,200 a year? Or is that a total over 5 years?
So back in 2015, it's showing that it had a substantial balance in there of 19,000. I don't know if that was decreased back
For the
then.
crisis fund?
Yes, sir. So that's why that amount on the average is going to be
Is that the
or
amount
miscellaneous.
average budget?
Oh, it's miscellaneous.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
So is that amount the average budgeted amount, or the amount that of expenditures?
That's the amount of that was allocated over the years.
Okay.
Okay, so
why was there such a precipitous drop then for last year and this year?
I honestly do not have an answer for that one as to why there was a change. If it may have been that they drop an adjustment on the budget line item. I don't know. I'd have to go back and check on that.
What are the specific items that the crisis fund pays for? What?
So that line item was called miscellaneous. So it was applicable for pretty much just anything. The board last meeting elected to change the name to crisis fund.
I see.
Primarily, Mr. Ingram, what we discussed was, the CCPD doesn't have like a rainy day fund or an emergency
Okay.
fund, if you will. And it was suggested by Captain Wagner that we call it a crisis fund. But in the event that something happens and we need to dip into something, have some extra funds available, CCPDs can't have CDs. And so, or something like that. So having money set aside for emergency type expenditures, and it had to be board approved, but just something to kind of start putting like a rainy day fund.
Okay.
Okay. Do you still feel it should be more than $500?
Well, I mean, based on your explanations, then no, I retract my original statement.
Okay. And if I understood you, Chief, that pretty much every dollars counted, already. In other words, we'd have to take $500 from some other, but that's what this is for, discuss, but we could take $500 from some other line item and put it in the crisis fund.
No, sir, you could still make that, you can still plug that in, and the proposed budget, we're going off the figures of proposed tax revenue that would be coming in. Like I said, right now, they're projecting an overage of around 19.2,
Okay.
but then you've got to deduct the increases for the future purchases.
True.
So it could balance out. It's going to be a hit and miss, towards the end of the year.
Hmm? Gotcha now. Okay. Mhm. Right. Or it could be less than that, maybe. Hope. Right, yeah, okay, okay. Well, I'm looking back in 2016, they had a shortage also, so I'm assuming that everything was okay back then. I don't like having those parentheses around that number, but mhm. Oh, okay. Well, Mr. Booth, if you want to make a motion, we can.
I move that we put $1,000 away in the crisis fund.
Do I have a second?
Can I say something before we, it's my concern is how close are we to the needing to approve the budget? Because if we make this change, we're gonna have to come back another week, aren't we? And then go through that again?
I don't think so.
Approve it?
No, this is what
No?
the hearing's
Okay.
for, yeah. We have a public hearing and.
This was a public hearing, and then
Okay.
you decide if
Mhm.
this is what you want.
Okay, okay. Chief, would you rather have $1,000 in there than 500?
Well, absolutely. I mean,
Well, then,
Does Mr. Evans have a second?
Then that's a second.
All right. Mr. Evans seconded Mr. Booth's motion to increase it from increase the crisis fund from 500 to 1,000. We open it to discussion. Okay. All right, there's a motion on the floor to increase the crisis fund from 500 to 1,000. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And Chief, you're making note of this for me too?
Ms. Davis is
Oh, Ms.
taking
Davis,
notes.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And let me just interject something. I didn't discuss, when we discussed last meeting about the signatories, I didn't discuss that with Ms. Davis, but I found her to be a very trustworthy individual, and that's why I asked her also. So anyway, that's okay. Okay, so on the full budget then, are there any other discussion regarding the full budget? Okay, do I hear a motion to accept the proposed budget with the correction? All right, Mr. Hurst makes a motion to accept the budget with the correction in the crisis fund. Do I hear a second?
I'll second
Is
that.
this
Mr. Evans,
including the
second.
10% increase?
I'm sorry?
Is this including the 10% increase that the chief suggested?
Isn't that what we're,
I believe
Yes.
so.
Should we vote
Yes.
on that?
well, no, this is proposed with
Okay.
the 10%. So, yeah, I mean, as presented, and that includes the 10% increases.
I second that.
Mr. Evans did. Any discussion? All right, the motion on the floor is to accept the 2022 proposed budget which includes the 10% increase and also the 500 increase in the crisis fund. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Very good. Chief, I thank you for getting that together, or Ms. Davis also, thank you for your work on that. Thank you. 4.3, next on the agenda, present and review of the 2021 expenditures and disbursements. Chief, are there any?
So I do have two more that were added recently since the last meeting. I know that we were gonna do them quarterly, but I think it's easier just to get them every meeting as possible. I did send these out to you. I didn't print copies. I apologize again if I didn't do that. The two expenses that came in, one of them is a reimbursement for training for one of our officers. We're tapping into the training fund there. And then the other one was for engine work on one of the units, the older Explorer. I don't know if I mentioned it the last time that it was in the shop. It was having engine problems. And that was one that's out of warranty now. It passed the time. It's over 5 years old, but it's only got 70,000 miles plus or minus.
Okay.
So it still has some life, but we wanted to try to include that in the next rotation with the other vehicles.
Okay.
And the reason that that one has, and we spoke about that, is it has the lower miles is because it was assigned as a supervisor unit. So supervisors don't drive too many miles.
Just one of the benefits of being a supervisor. Does anyone have any questions or comments to the chief regarding his presentation about the expenditures and disbursements? Mr. Ingram? No?
Fine.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I include you. You're just, anyway, okay, hearing none. We'll move on to the next one. 4.4, discussion and update on police vehicles regarding warranties, trade-ins, and sale rotation. Mr. Booth?
Well, several years ago, I did, along with another board member, review all the expenses that the vehicles in the fleet had. And we rarely ever used the warranties because we were getting rid of the cars at 3 years. And so I was adamantly against having the warranty. Since then, I've reconsidered the idea, but I'd also like to propose that we keep the car for 4 years instead of the 3 to make use of that warranty. Because the mileage at the 3 years is probably on average, maybe up to 60 to 75,000 miles, depends on the vehicle. That's it.
So, Mr. Booth, what you would like to discuss is whether, and Chief, I'll leave that open to you, is to, like right now, if I'm not mistaken, obviously, correct me, Chief. Right now, we trade in our vehicles every 3 years.
That is correct. The marked units, the marked patrol units are rotated every 3 years. They go into the 4th year by the time we place that order and then take delivery of the vehicles. We're at probably, 3.5 to, sometimes 3/4 of the year into the next year by the time we get them and get them upfitted, and ready for the street. Because we have to send in the old units to get them stripped and then install the new stuff into the equipment into the new vehicle.
So we reuse like the emergency equipment, the lights and siren, all that kind of good stuff.
We try to use as much as possible, reuse it unless it's just, a couple of years ago, we did have to change over from some of the older model strobes or LEDs that we have because they were just failing. We were using a different vendor, or the installer, the upfitter was using a different vendor, and they were just failing. So, but we try to work that out accordingly as we purchase the new vehicles.
Would you mind explaining the process as far as, we need to wait on our purchases, like when we have enough, I can't think of the word right now, but anyway, to send off so that it's less expensive to do the markings, do the Castle Hills marks on the side, markings on the side, et cetera. Is that, or the paint job, the paint of the vehicle, do we hold off until we have a larger number before we send that out, or can we do that anytime? If we want to trade in a vehicle and.
We can do it anytime. It's just the stall out really is going to be the manufacturer on the vehicles. They don't just have these sitting in a parking lot. More specifically, our color. Typical is white and black. Those you can probably get one here delivered tomorrow. Because we're running a blue, they're a little harder. And generally what I've understood from salesmen, they tell me that they will wait until other entities submit an order, so that they can do a large percentage of these vehicles all at one time and not just 5 vehicles. But the stall out again on this go around was we placed our order in late 2018 and we were expecting them for 2019. Then Ford shut down for about 6 months. And then when they started their production again, it's now wherever we're falling in queue. So we didn't take delivery of these vehicles until a year later in 2020, in February of 2020, in fact. And like I said, once we take delivery of them, we got to strip the old ones and get the new ones in there re-upfitted.
And I'm not sure if this is a good analogy or not, and I hate using my old job as an item, but when SAPD had those French blue uniforms, and everybody pretty much had those because that's what was prevalent, and most of the officers buying uniforms were from SAPD, being it's so large. And then when we went to the darker uniform, pretty much everybody else or we may have been following everybody else, but finally it's just that whatever is more prevalent, it's easier to get. So I've noticed that a lot of the smaller departments decided to start buying the darker uniforms, and because they're easier, they're being stocked by all the uniform locations. I'm getting to my point is that if it's easier to get a vehicle that's black and white, have we thought about changing our colors to black and white so that we can buy a vehicle, get one delivered tomorrow or soon?
I was probably exaggerating a little bit on the getting it tomorrow, but do you have anything?
We looked into the black and white paint schemes, and they typically run $500 to $1,000 more per unit.
Oh,
So in lieu of spending that money on paint, we'd rather spend it on other equipment, lights, sirens, and things like that, and stick with one solid color car.
okay.
The whites tend to, have more of show dirt more, show wear and tear more, as you probably remember. So that's why we kind of went towards the blue.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I was just spitballing. Because, and the reason I was saying that is because if we have a problem with rotation, or like Mr. Booth's suggestion of, extending it to 4 years, if we don't have to wait, to get the paint job, or there's, if we can expedite that process because of one reason or another, then maybe that might be something to look at, but I was just spitballing. Anybody else have any comments or questions?
Yeah, I just had a question. Is 3 years like a national safety standard for how often vehicles should be rotated?
So generally we've looked at, the way we've looked at it is 3 years. It gets us to the mileage of around 80,000 miles. These cars are running, some are running at 16 hours a day. Some of them, in fact, today we're just looking at it, they're running the 24/7 or the 24 hours. On top of that, the idle hours are greater than the mileage on these cars. And the idle hours actually are what breaks down that engine a lot sooner than the mileage does. We did a study on that as well, and it's just the idle hours. You know that a lot of our officers, they'll get out on accidents, whatever, and that car will idle for, could idle for an hour or whatever, clearing up an accident. And so like I said, the idle hours take into account a lot more than the actual mileage. And that's why all the police cars have a built-in hour meter on top of the odometer.
I didn't know that. I didn't know they had a special meter like that. That's great.
Yes.
Because just to share, I mean, I reached out to a couple of police chiefs that I know, and they both agreed that it's the run time, not just the mileage, but it's the run time, so.
And if I may, when we were discussing that unit 2 that we just got out of the shop,
Mhm.
You look at the bill for that one, that was $3,500 for that repair, and that was engine work. I think the turbos were blown on it. It wasn't a full engine, it's just the turbos. So if we do not have the warranties, or we're pushing that timeline, where they're gonna, expire, the warranties pretty much pay for themselves, with towards the other end of the life of the vehicle.
Does anyone have any other comments or questions, or want to make a motion?
Chief, how long do those warranties cover? The 3 year, or do they cover longer than 3 years? How long do those warranties last?
We purchased the warranties that are 5 years or 100,000 miles.
100,000 miles?
In this case, with this particular unit, it exceeded the 5 years.
Okay.
Like I said, we were still under the 100,000, but it's over 5 years.
So keeping it 4 years wouldn't be a big issue if it almost takes 4 years anyway, would it be?
Again, it's a gamble on what where the mileage is at.
But-
Like I said, this last go around, they were all the cars were over 100,000 miles, and they were at 4 years.
That was because of the production of Ford, not so much.
It still doesn't matter. It's still 4 years. We exceeded the 100,000 miles, and we couldn't trade them in. They wouldn't make it to Dallas for trade-in.
Do you have a copy of that study I could get?
Yes, sir. I'll have to find it. It was provided to y'all the last time at a previous meetings, like you mentioned earlier.
Any other comments, questions? Mr. Moore?
Just one to understand, given the size of Castle Hills and our fleet, is it the whole fleet that we're doing at a certain interval of miles or time or years? Or are we doing like half the fleet at a time?
We're actually doing pretty much half the fleet. Like I said, the unmarked units, because they're on the road so much
Right.
longer, they get traded every 3 years. The unmarked, the ones, the administratives, the detective units, the step unit, those are on a 5-year rotation. So again, they're
Okay.
pushing the 6th year.
So then only half the fleet has to go through a lame duck period waiting for the new cars.
Correct.
Right, okay, okay, thank you.
Anything else for the chief regarding the warranties? Okay, under announcements, discussion and possible action on scheduling the next meeting. Does anybody have a calendar? This is primarily for Mr. Evans and Mr. Hurst and Mr. Ingram. Do you guys want to meet like in October or? Nope.
I mean, unless we have something specifically to discuss, I don't think there's a reason to schedule a meeting.
Well, you're going to have three new, just in case you weren't aware, Mr. Booth, Mr. Marr, and I were not reappointed. So you're going to have new individuals that need to be sworn in probably in September.
That
or
is
whenever.
correct. All four new board members, including Mr. Evans, would need to be sworn in.
So,
Okay.
so I don't know whether you want to make one in September just for that and bring, you can,
If we can tentatively set one up and then we can, if we need to change the date later, we can do that. I don't know, the 22nd or 25th or 9th, I should say.
of September.
Yes, sir.
Does everybody have September 22nd open? Any issues with that?
Let me see.
Then I'll make a motion that we schedule the next CCPD meeting for September 22nd at 6 PM. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Booth seconds. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's the next meeting.
So does every member need to be sworn in again, even if we're,
No,
No, sir. Yourself and Mr. Hurst would not need to be sworn in
I
because
see.
you're on a different year.
okay.
I'm sorry? I did. And Mr. Booth seconded. Thank you.
Mr. Hurst, it's going to be John Squires, Patsy Martin, and Chance, sorry, I forget your last name, Hoffman. And then Mr. Evans.
Mhm.
Right.
Well, welcome, Mr. Hoffman. Okay. Any, going on to the next one, any board member comments?
Well, I've enjoyed being on the board for, I guess, 3 terms. And I really appreciate you, Mr. Jones, for leading our group. I think you've done the best job that I've experienced in my term.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'll second that. Thank you, Mr. Booth, and thank you, Mr. Jones, and for your contributions.
Well, thank you.
Yes, I'd also like to thank everybody for their contributions over the past year.
Thank you. Well, Mr. Hurst, do you have anything to say or any comments, Mr. Moore? I can just say, this has been a pleasure. It was a learning experience and it's just an opportunity to give back to our community. And I appreciate that opportunity. And it was a pleasure and a privilege. So thank you, everybody, Chief, Captain, Ms. Davis. Thank you all very much for your input and your hard work. So thank you.
I think all of y'all.
Next number, I know Mr. Hurst will be glad about this one. Number 7 has to do with adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Mr. Booth makes a motion to adjourn, seconded by Mr. Marr. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Ingram.